All right, so I feel it's like an outside, like all the specific architecture background or urban planning background, for example. And it comes more from my experience, especially coming from Paris to Beirut in my adult years, actually. So my presentation would be more organic, and I hope I'll answer all the questions. Um, so I would like to just clarify something. So I work at the NGO Nahnu, and I'm glad to see that my colleague Eli will also be presenting for Nahnu. I'm glad to see other also familiar faces like George Arbil. And I also volunteer at the NGO just to make Financing Save Beirut Heritage. So it was initially a youth movement that was started in 2011 through a Facebook page, as simply as that, and it was registered as an NGO in 2013 to become more structured. The NGO's goal is to promote cultural heritage, and especially with a focus on architectural heritage in Beirut specifically. Many people ask us why Beirut is because most of the volunteers actually live in Beirut, and it is also the city where the architectural heritage has been disappearing actually the most in a fast way, and throughout the years. So the urgency came out from Beirut actually itself. Our main programs consist in awareness activities that have both education components, advocacy and grassroots intervention. And what we today, the way we function is mostly through punctual interventions, as we are volunteer based, and meaning we all have a day job, and this is done during the spare time that we have. Our ambition is to actually become a full-time NGO and be able to involve in more advocacy as more advocacy structure. So thinking about the significance of cultural heritage, especially in from all the insights that I've heard before, I found really interesting to hear all the inputs and how they actually, all this mix of opinions and perspectives actually join my own perspective, and what we could, how we could define a heritage, because it might seem like a very straight to the point term, heritage, cultural heritage, but it actually is a very complex concept that cannot be defined, I feel, in one sentence or even a paragraph, and especially because it is a subjective concept, I feel more. And the common ground to be able to at least give a definition of heritage for me would be that it is the shaping of collective memory that also gathers elements of common identity, and this leads to actually develop a cohesion between a community, between people, and between humanity also in general. One of the common traits, I think, of cultural heritage is that it builds actually humanity in general, and it is something that tells a story and has meaning. So as Josh said earlier, for me, heritage is not something that is frozen in time. It has multiple layers, multiple shapes also. It can be in architecture, in food, in cinema, storytelling in general, in art. And it actually is part of all aspects of life, and it's something that evolves. So as George said, it's not frozen in time. It's something that is part of the fabric. And I think the interesting thing about heritage is it's something that actually people shape. It comes from the people. So the man or the community in general is at the center of heritage, and um, it is of high importance in a society or in people's life, in a way that it defines what we're going to leave behind us, the way, the image that our future generation will have, and how it will build also future generation. So it is a choice also of whether we build a heritage that we are proud of, or a heritage that will have negative impact in the future. So I see cultural heritage as an opportunity for peace and unity in Lebanon, specifically in a country like Lebanon. It is for me compared to a country, for example, like in France, where there we feel, at least from outside, there is more unity, etc. It is a formidable tool that we can use actually to bring people together. And I think we saw this especially in the latest revolution in Lebanon, where people actually took over their public spaces, part of their heritage, and all together, and were able to respect it, and make it accessible and open to everybody. Uh, Especially like if we consider Martyr Square, and for example the Egg in downtown, and the Grand Theatre that George also mentioned. And to focus more on architectural heritage, for example, there's a quote that I like, which is from John Ruskin, that says that without architecture, there would be no remembering. And so I think this kind of like summarizes, uh, we can say also without food or without storytelling and art, etc., there wouldn't be no remembering. So, so this for me kind of like englobes the concept of cultural heritage and its importance. Um, Going to the role of youth in all of this. Um, it is not an easy one, as far as I've seen, but in Lebanon, and it's something that I relate, especially noting that I was not an active or an activist while living in France, and I became one when I started living in Lebanon. This might come to the fact that I feel that I needed to preserve or preserve heritage that was mine as a birth, I could call it a birthright, and which motivated me in becoming involved. And I could see throughout the work the challenge that we face in that. So something that struck me is that people are actually when we participate in conferences or meetings, uh, we get reactions from people that are surprised actually that we are that there are so many youth involved in trying to promote and preserve heritage in general. And I think this comes from, and it was shown, as I told you, in the latest revolution here in Lebanon, where it was amazing to see how the youth led a movement to open actually the Grand Théâtre, and which became accessible to everybody. Such a mysterious and iconic building that suddenly became kind of like a museum, a daytime museum. It was amazing to see the people walking around and with the families, young people all ages and all backgrounds all together in this place and discovering that part of their history. And I think that this engagement or this leadership of the youth comes from the fact that there is a bit of an anxiety in our society to find our place, especially at an age where we're trying to find ourselves, our identity, and we need to actually relate to something, a common ground. And it is so there's a need to a sense of belonging, and I think this is why youth are actually so involved in this work. And I can see this involvement to the fact that most of our followers or volunteers are under the age of 35, for example, and we receive a lot of requests from students to help them in their thesis, for example, and a lot of theses actually I can see are related to the topics of remembrance, heritage, and the role actually of our heritage in our lives, etc. And so it is important, consequently, that youth actually know what the assets are available, which assets are available, and also, sorry, and so it is shown in their actions. So I'm going to tell you a bit about what kind of actions we did with our volunteers at Save Beirut Heritage. There is a big part of activism. So whether it's for campaigns, like so George mentioned the Fouad Boutros campaign, that where we collaborated with many organizations, so including the ACA, into preventing a highway actually from cutting the whole Ashrafiyeh neighborhood, and this was a great collaboration actually that became successful as the highway didn't happen, and it was a mix of it represents actually the kind of activism we do in general, so a mix of protests, press conferences, public discussions, and online also awareness, tours also. So this is part also of part of our activism. There's awareness, so we do a lot of guided tours in Beirut. It is very interesting to see how a lot of young people are attracted to that, and we try to actually form them into giving those tours so they can get familiar with their community or their neighborhood, for example, and be able to tell the story of their neighborhood and relate to it. And also we had what we call the watch days that was in Al-Blat, where we had a series of cultural activities, from readings to tours, food markets, movie screening, etc. And also this draw a lot of attention and attracted a lot of people. So you can see that there's really a thirst in discovering the meaning of a neighborhood and what it is made of, especially from its own community. And in terms of digital tools and online, let's say online tools, we started as a Facebook group, so we use a lot of social media. It is one of the most used ways now to reach, especially a youth audience. And it is interesting to see how this brings people together, and especially since 2010, it has really changed the game. People are more aware and taking action. And going further than that, is also the use of virtual reality to kind of revive what we could call lost heritage, and which I think is very important in the documentation and making um, especially sites accessible, what we call tangible heritage, accessible to a larger public. And so to conclude this, how can we, to answer the question, how can we work in an interdisciplinary way? I think the major thing is participatory partnership, what I would call, and community engagement are really two key aspects in future endeavors. So the fact that we don't live as a one community, for example, it's a whole system actually that works together, and each part of the system, each actor, whether it's the civil society, the public institutions, the private institutions, academies, etc., they each have a role in the preservation, promotion, and the regeneration of cultural heritage. And this has to be done in sort of a participatory approach. And to give a concrete example, is the fact that we don't have a public cultural, policy in Lebanon. We everything that happens on the culture side is all private, and so it is definitely a need to be addressed, and but not just by the people holding power or the academics, for example, especially, but with the people, actually, with the communities, in a participatory way. And I think the symptom of that is the fact that architect Youssef Haidar has mentioned that there are two of his work as a museum are still closed, and I think it comes from the fact that there is no policy related in Lebanon, and the fact that and I'm gonna also bounce on what Eva said, is the fact that heritage is such a opportunity for local development, especially economic development, in the current situation we're in Lebanon, and but with the goal of serving the community, using heritage as an asset and becoming a systemic process to spread in all of Lebanon. So so I hope I didn't take too much time. And I would like to thank you. And I mentioned that, by the way, the backgrounds that you saw, the sketches, were done by Antoine Attallah. He's also part of the Beirut Heritage, and represent sites of Al Blat that we have toured when we did the watch days in the neighborhood.